stop, right now, stop defending yourself to people who will never understand you anyway. You know what your biggest mistake has been? Thinking that if you just explained yourself clearly enough, if you just showed them who you really are, they'd finally get it. But chosen one, here's the truth that's about to change everything. The moment you realize how fundamentally different you are from most people walking this planet, you'll understand why explaining yourself has always felt like trying to teach fish about the sky. They're not rejecting your explanation. They're rejecting the frequency you operate on. And that frequency, that undeniable energy that pulses through everything you do, it's been speaking for you all along. Your aura has been screaming truths your mouth could never articulate. They notice. Trust me, they notice. That's why they've been so uncomfortable around you. That's why your silence unsettles them more than someone else's noise. That's why they've spent years trying to decode you, copy you, or destroy you. Because what you carry isn't learned, it's encoded. Before we go deeper, I need you to do something. Press that like button and subscribe, because what you're about to hear certain people don't want spreading. This isn't motivation. This is confirmation of what you've always felt but couldn't name. When you engage with this content, you're not just supporting a channel. You're joining a frequency that refuses to be silenced. You're standing with others who know what it feels like to be misunderstood, targeted, and underestimated. So hit that like button now. Leave a comment with the number 777 if you already feel this truth vibrating in your chest. And let's continue. Because chosen one, you're about to discover exactly why your silence has always been louder than their words. Let me tell you something they'll never admit out loud. When you walk into a room, the temperature changes. Not literally, but energetically. The atmosphere shifts. Conversations pause for half a second. Eyes flicker in your direction, even when people pretend not to notice. That's not paranoia. That's presence. You carry something most people spend their entire lives trying to fake: authenticity. Real, unfiltered, undiluted authenticity. And in a world built on performance, masks, and carefully curated images, your realness is terrifying. It exposes everyone else's costume party for what it is: a desperate attempt to hide from themselves. Think about this for a moment. How many times have you entered a space and felt people get defensive without you saying a single word? How often have strangers projected assumptions onto you before you opened your mouth? That's because your energy is already communicating. It's broadcasting on a frequency that bypasses words entirely. When someone with a guilty conscience stands next to someone carrying truth, their body reacts before their brain can rationalize it. They fidget, they overcompensate. They suddenly need to prove themselves to you, even though you never asked for proof. That's your aura doing its work. It's the lie detector they can't manipulate. It's the mirror they can't avoid. And it's been operating on your behalf this entire time. You see, chosen one, most people communicate through words because that's all they have. But you communicate through presence. The way you hold silence speaks volumes about your confidence. The way you refuse to fill empty air with empty talk reveals your comfort with yourself. The way you can sit in a room full of chaos and remain untouched by it demonstrates a level of internal alignment that others can feel but can't replicate. They study you. They watch how you move. They analyze your patterns, not because they want to befriend you, because they want to understand how you do what you do without trying. And when they realize it can't be copied, that's when the resentment begins. Here's what most people will never tell you. Your differentness isn't subtle, it's glaring. It's written in every choice you make, every boundary you set, every moment you refuse to compromise your truth for comfort. But because you've spent so long being told you're too much, too intense, too different, you started believing that your uniqueness was a flaw. You began explaining yourself, defending your choices, trying to make your existence more palatable for people who were never going to digest it anyway. But tonight, that stops. Because the truth is, your energy has been doing the explaining all along, and the people who were meant to understand you already do. The ones who don't aren't confused, they're threatened. Let's get something straight. The people who've been in your life, the ones who've betrayed you, used you, or suddenly distanced themselves, they knew exactly who you were. They read you from day one. Your transparency isn't a weakness, it's a test. And most people fail it spectacularly. You don't hide your intentions, you don't play games. You show up as yourself, expecting others to do the same. But what you didn't realize is that your openness revealed their emptiness. Your honesty exposed their lies. Your consistency highlighted their instability, and instead of rising to meet you, they resented you for making them feel inadequate. Imagine walking into a library where every book is blank inside, empty pages pretending to be stories. Then you arrive, an actual book with real chapters, real depth, real substance. The blank books don't celebrate you. They feel exposed. They realize their covers mean nothing when placed next to something with actual content. That's been your entire life. You've been surrounded by people who looked like they had it together on the outside, but the moment you got close, you realized there was nothing beneath the surface. And because you couldn't fake interest in emptiness, because you couldn't pretend their shallow conversations fulfilled you, they labeled you difficult, arrogant, unapproachable, cold. But here's the part that burns them. You never needed their approval to be valuable. Your worth wasn't determined by how many people understood you. Your significance wasn't measured by popularity. You knew somewhere deep in your core that being accepted by the wrong people was worse than being rejected by them. So you stood alone. You chose solitude over soul-draining connections. You walked away from tables where your presence was tolerated but not celebrated. And every time you did, your aura got stronger. Because real power isn't given by others. It's cultivated in the moments you refuse to compromise yourself for acceptance. They've been reading you this whole time, chosen one. They know you're not like them. They know you see through their performances. They know that one conversation with you can unravel years of lies they've told themselves. That's why they avoid depth with you. That's why they keep things surface level. That's why they gossip about you instead of talking to you. Because engaging with your energy demands honesty, and honesty is the one thing most people are desperately trying to avoid. So they watch from a distance, studying you, trying to figure out how someone can be so unbothered by the things that consume them. And when they can't crack your code, they try to discredit it. They call your peace arrogance. They call your boundaries coldness. They call your self-sufficiency selfishness. But none of those labels stick because your energy tells the real story, and that story is undeniable. Here's something that's going to shift your entire perspective. Your silence isn't passive, it's active. It's one of the most aggressive forms of communication you possess because it forces people to fill in the blanks. And what do people fill those blanks with? Their own insecurities, their own fears, their own projections. When you stop explaining yourself, when you stop defending your choices, when you stop justifying your existence, people are left with nothing but their own narratives, and those narratives always reveal more about them than they ever could about you. Think about how much energy you've wasted trying to make people understand you. The late-night conversations, the repeated explanations, the hope that maybe this time they'll finally get it. But every time you explained, you gave them another opportunity to twist your words, misinterpret your intentions, and reshape your truth into something they could use against you. Your silence removes that opportunity. It's the period at the end of the sentence. It says, "I've said what I needed to say. Your interpretation is no longer my responsibility." And that level of detachment, that's what true power looks like. Not control over others, control over yourself, control over your energy, control over what you allow to disturb your peace. Your enemies hate your silence more than they ever hated your words, because when you were talking, they could argue, they could debate, they could gaslight. But when you stop talking, when you simply exist in your truth without needing their validation, they're left screaming into a void. They post subliminal messages hoping you'll respond. They bring up your name in conversations you're not part of. They check your pages, your updates, your movements, obsessed with someone who's moved on completely. That obsession is the price they pay for mishandling your presence, and your silence is the invoice they can't afford to pay. Let me paint you a picture. A lion doesn't explain itself to sheep. It doesn't justify its existence. It doesn't defend its nature. It simply is, and everything in its presence responds accordingly. Some animals respect the lion from a distance. Others avoid it entirely. A few foolish ones challenge it and learn quickly why that was a mistake. But the lion never once stopped to explain why it deserves respect. Its presence communicated everything necessary. That's you, chosen one. You're the lion, surrounded by sheep who keep demanding you explain why you won't graze with them. And every time you tried to explain, you lowered yourself to their level. But tonight, that ends. Tonight you reclaim the power of your silence. Tonight you let your aura do all the talking. Pay attention to this. Have you noticed how many people try to copy you? They watch your moves. They adopt your language. They mirror your style. They suddenly start quoting the same philosophies you've been living by for years. At first, you might have felt flattered, but then you realize something darker. But they're not copying you out of admiration. They're studying you out of envy. They see the results your authenticity brings, the respect your silence commands, the peace your boundaries create, and they want those results without doing the internal work you did to earn them. But here's where the imitation falls apart. They can copy your external patterns, but they can't replicate your internal frequency. They can dress like you, talk like you, even move through spaces the way you do, but the moment pressure hits, the mask falls off. Because what you carry isn't a technique, it's a transformation. You didn't learn how to be unbothered, you became unbothered through fire. You didn't study how to set boundaries, you built them, brick by brick after people repeatedly violated your space. You didn't watch a tutorial on self-worth, you discovered it in the moments when everyone else abandoned you and you were forced to become your own foundation. That's why their imitation feels hollow. That's why people can sense the difference between you and your copycats, even if they can't articulate why. Your energy carries scars that have been turned into strength. Your presence holds wisdom that can only come from walking through darkness and choosing not to become it. When they try to fake that, when they try to shortcut the process, their energy betrays them. It leaks, it glitches, it doesn't hold up under scrutiny, and the same people who praise their performance eventually see through it. Because counterfeit can never match original, imitation can never replicate essence. Here's what's happening behind the scenes. Every time someone copies you and fails to get your results, your value increases. Every time they try to embody your energy and fall short, your uniqueness becomes more apparent. They're not your competition, they're your advertising team. They're out here showing the world what happens when you try to fake what you are naturally. And the contrast between their struggle and your ease only highlights how unreplicable you truly are. So let them copy, let them study, let them try to decode what makes you different. Because every attempt to become you only proves that there's only one you, and that chosen one is a position they'll never fill. There's a reason people feel uneasy around you before you've said anything threatening. There's a reason manipulators suddenly change their approach when you enter the conversation. There's a reason liars can't maintain eye contact with you, Your aura carries a warning system that operates independently of your conscious awareness. It scans, it detects, it responds. And people's nervous systems pick up on that energetic radar before their brains can process what's happening. You've been walking around thinking you need to verbally set boundaries, call out lies, and defend yourself, but your energy has been doing that work automatically. Think about how many times someone started a sentence with you, then abruptly changed direction mid-thought, or how often people have confessed things to you they claim they've never told anyone else. That's not coincidence. Your aura creates a space where truth has no choice but to surface. Lies feel too heavy to maintain in your presence. Pretense feels exhausting. Performance feels pointless. So people either show up authentic or they avoid you altogether. And honestly, both outcomes work in your favor. The real ones stay. The fake ones filter themselves out. Your energy has been doing the sorting you thought you needed to do manually. But here's what makes this even more powerful. Your aura doesn't just warn others, it warns you. How many times have you felt uncomfortable around someone before they revealed their true intentions? How often did your body tense up in situations that looked safe on the surface? That wasn't anxiety. That was your internal guidance system detecting danger your mind hadn't consciously registered yet. You're not paranoid, you're perceptive. The difference is paranoia fears what isn't there. Perception senses what is there before it fully manifests. And your aura has been trying to protect you by broadcasting warnings you've been trained to ignore. Society teaches people to override their intuition, be polite, give chances, don't judge, but chosen one, your energy doesn't operate on social politeness. It operates on truth. When someone's frequency doesn't match their words, your aura knows. When someone's intentions are misaligned with their actions, your system alerts you. The problem is, you've been taught to ignore those alerts in favor of giving people the benefit of the doubt. But tonight, that pattern breaks. Because your aura has been speaking a language you're finally ready to trust. And when you start honoring what your energy has been telling you all along, you'll realize you already knew everything you needed to know. You just needed permission to act on it. Let's talk about why people constantly underestimate you. It's not because they don't see your potential. It's because they can't imagine reaching it themselves, so they convince themselves it's unreachable for you too. Your dreams make them uncomfortable. Your goals sound unrealistic. Your confidence feels like arrogance. But none of those reactions are about you. They're about the ceiling they've placed on their own lives. You represent a possibility they're too afraid to pursue. So instead of letting you inspire them, they try to shrink you down to their level. They disguise it as concern, as advice, as reality checks. But what they're really saying is, please, don't go where I'm too scared to follow. Imagine living in a village where everyone has agreed the mountain is unclimbable. They've built their entire identity around staying in the valley. Then you show up talking about climbing that mountain. You haven't even started the ascent yet, but just the fact that you're preparing terrifies them. Because if you succeed, it proves the mountain was always climbable. It proves they chose comfort over courage. It proves their limitations were self-imposed. So they attack your preparation. They mock your training. They predict your failure. Not because they have evidence you'll fail, because they need you to fail to validate their own decision not to try. But here's the twist. Every time they project their limitations onto you, they're actually revealing their own prison. Every time they tell you something's impossible, they're confessing what they've convinced themselves they can't do. Every time they warn you about reaching too high, they're admitting where they stopped reaching. Their doubt isn't information, it's autobiography. And once you realize that, their opinions lose all power. Because you're not asking people who stayed in the valley for directions to the summit. You're not taking advice from people who've never walked your path. You're simply allowing them to watch as you prove that their limitations were never yours. The beautiful part about this journey? Your success doesn't need their belief. Your potential doesn't require their approval. Your transformation isn't contingent on their understanding. You've been carrying around the weight of other people's doubts like they were facts, but tonight, you set that weight down, because their projections are their problem. Your potential is your promise, and the gap between what they think you can do and what you're actually capable of, that's the space where miracles happen. That's where you've always belonged, and that's exactly where your aura has been trying to take you while their words tried to hold you back. Here's the part they'll never understand. You weren't supposed to fit in. Your discomfort in normal situations isn't a sign that something's wrong with you, it's a sign that you're operating at a frequency most people will never access. You know how a radio picks up different stations depending on where you tune the dial? Most people are tuned to the same station, the same conversations, the same goals, the same fears, the same cycles, but you're picking up a completely different broadcast. That's why their world never felt like home, because it wasn't meant to. Think about every time you've tried to force yourself to enjoy things that bored you. Every time you've faked interest in conversations that drained you. Every time you've molded yourself into spaces that rejected your shape. You weren't failing at fitting in, you were succeeding at being yourself in places designed for someone else. Your difference isn't a deficiency, it's your assignment. You were built different because your purpose requires different. The same traits they criticized, the same qualities they mocked, those are the exact tools you need for what you're meant to build. Let me break this down further. When a surgeon walks into a room, they don't apologize for knowing more about anatomy than everyone else. When a pilot sits in a cockpit, they don't dim their expertise to make passengers comfortable. When a translator speaks multiple languages, they don't pretend to only know one to avoid standing out. Their difference is their function. And your difference works exactly the same way. You see patterns others miss because you're meant to decode them. You sense energy shifts others ignore because you're meant to navigate them. You ask questions others avoid because you're meant to uncover answers they're afraid to find. But here's where most chosen ones get trapped. They spend so much energy trying to be relatable that they sabotage their own calling. They dumb down their language. They hide their insights. They shrink their presence, all in the name of making others comfortable. But comfort isn't your job. Transformation is. Your function isn't to make people feel good about where they are. It's to show them where they could be if they were brave enough to evolve. And that message, that energy, that frequency you carry, it's not meant for everyone. It's meant for the few who are ready to hear it. The ones who recognize your difference as direction. The ones who see your weirdness as wisdom. The ones who understand that your refusal to fit in was always your superpower. Here's something that always plays out the same way. The people who took your presence for granted will suddenly realize what they lost the moment you're gone. Not immediately. That's the cruelest part. At first, when you walk away, they feel relieved. They celebrate your absence like a victory. They convince themselves they're better off without your intensity, your standards, your truth. But give it time, give it weeks or months, and watch what happens. The peace you brought gets replaced with chaos. The clarity you provided gets replaced with confusion. The energy you contributed gets replaced with emptiness. And suddenly, everyone who couldn't wait for you to leave is scrambling to figure out how to get you back. But here's the thing about walking away as a chosen one. You don't leave the same way regular people do. You don't slam doors. You don't make dramatic exits. You don't announce your departure with speeches. You simply remove your energy. And that removal creates a void so profound that everyone who interacted with you feels it. They can't name it at first, they just notice things feel off. Projects that flowed when you were around suddenly stall. Groups that thrived with your input suddenly fracture. Relationships that felt solid with your presence suddenly feel fragile. Because you weren't just there, you were the glue, the anchor, the foundation. And they never realized it until the structure started crumbling without you. Now watch what they do next. Some will reach out, pretending like nothing happened. They'll act casual, like time erased the damage. Others will send indirect messages, hoping you'll take the bait and return. A few will flat out apologize, not because they understand what they did wrong, but because they're uncomfortable with the consequences of losing you. But here's what separates you from who you used to be. You're no longer moved by their sudden realizations. You're no longer flattered by their belated appreciation, because you know something they're just discovering. Your presence is a privilege, not a right, and privileges get revoked when they're abused. The people who miss you now had you before. They had access to your energy, your wisdom, your support. And they wasted it. They took you for granted. They mishandled what was rare. And now they're living with that choice. That's not cruelty, that's consequence. You're not responsible for making them comfortable with the emptiness they created by pushing you away. Your job is to protect your energy moving forward. To honor yourself by never returning to spaces that didn't value you the first time. Because, chosen one, here's the final truth. They don't actually miss you. They miss what you did for them. And that's exactly why they'll never get access again. Let me tell you why your silence has been your greatest weapon. While they were busy talking, performing, and seeking validation, you were building something they couldn't see. An internal kingdom. A fortress of self-acknowledge, a throne made of boundaries, self-respect, and unshakable truth. They thought your quietness meant you had nothing to say. But what you were really doing was saving your energy for the few who deserved to hear you. You weren't silent because you were weak. You were silent because you were selective. And that selectivity, that refusal to waste words on ears that weren't ready to receive them, that's what built your power. Think about all the moments they tried to bait you into arguments. All the times they threw shade hoping you'd react. All the instances where they wanted you to defend yourself, explain yourself, prove yourself. And you didn't take the bait. You let their words fall into silence. You let their provocations dissolve into irrelevance. And every time you did that, your throne got higher. Because real power isn't about having the last word. It's about not needing to respond at all. It's about being so secure in your truth that their lies can't even reach you. That's the level you've been operating on, and that's the level they'll never understand. Here's what they're realizing now. Your silence wasn't submission, it was strategy. You weren't hiding, you were observing. Every moment they thought they were winning because you weren't fighting back, you were actually collecting data, learning their patterns, understanding their tactics, watching them reveal themselves. And now you have something they'll never possess, complete clarity about who they are. They showed you their true nature while you protected yours. They exposed their weaknesses while you fortified your strength. And that imbalance, that gap between your awareness and their ignorance, that's what makes you untouchable now. The throne you built in silence isn't something they can climb. It's not something they can buy. It's not something they can imitate, because it was constructed from materials they don't have access to. Patience, discipline, self-control, discernment. These aren't traits you perform. They're principles you embody. And every day you chose silence over reaction, you laid another brick in a foundation they'll never be able to replicate. So let them talk, let them speculate, let them create narratives about who you are. Because while they're busy talking about you, you're busy becoming someone they couldn't imagine even in their wildest dreams. And that chosen one is the ultimate victory. Not proving them wrong, becoming so right they can't even argue anymore. Remember when they watched you struggle and did nothing? Remember when they saw you down and kicked harder instead of helping you up? Remember when your pain was their entertainment? They gathered around your brokenness like it was a show. They whispered about your failures like they were facts. They wrote you off like you were finished. But here's what they didn't account for. Pressure doesn't break everyone. Some people like you, get compressed into diamonds. And now that you're shining, now that you're rising, now that you're thriving, they're confused. They're uncomfortable. Because your success contradicts the narrative they built about you. Think about how many people rooted for your downfall. How many secretly hoped you'd stay stuck so they could feel superior. How many needed you to fail to validate their own decision not to try. Your struggles gave them comfort, your pain gave them peace. Because as long as you were down, they could look down. But the moment you got up, the moment you dusted yourself off, the moment you started winning, their entire worldview shattered. Because you weren't supposed to recover. You weren't supposed to rise. You weren't supposed to become the very thing they swore you'd never be. But you did. And now they have to live with the fact that they bet against someone who was always going to win. Here's the beautiful irony. The same people who mocked your journey now want to study your blueprint. The same ones who laughed at your dreams now ask how you made them reality. The same voices that said you'd never make it now want to interview you about your success. But you remember. You remember who was there during the climb and who only showed up for the view. You remember who supported you in the dark and who only celebrated you in the light. And that memory, that clarity about who people really are, that's what keeps you protected. Because success attracts crowds, but struggle reveals truth, and you know exactly who passed that truth test. The wins you're experiencing now aren't accidents. They're not luck, they're not coincidence. They're the direct result of every moment you refused to quit when quitting would have been easier. Every night you pushed through when giving up felt tempting. Every time you chose to keep building when the world told you to stop. Your success isn't surprising to you because you know the work you put in. The only people shocked by your rise are the ones who weren't paying attention to your grind. And that chosen one is their loss. Because they could have been part of your story. They could have witnessed the transformation up close. But they were too busy betting against you to invest in you. And now they're watching from the outside, wondering how they miscalculated so badly. Here's the final truth you need to accept. Your evolution doesn't require their comprehension. Your growth doesn't need their approval. Your transformation doesn't wait for their permission. You've been carrying this weight, this burden of wanting people to understand your journey. You've been trying to bring people along who were never meant to travel this path with you. But tonight that burden lifts, because the only person who needs to understand your transformation is you. The only validation that matters is the one you give yourself. The only approval worth seeking is your own. Think about how much energy you've wasted trying to make people see what they're not ready to perceive. How many conversations you've had trying to explain what can only be experienced. How many times you've defended your choices to people who are never going to support them anyway. But every moment you spent explaining was a moment you weren't building. Every second you spent defending was a second you weren't progressing. And tonight you reclaim all of that lost time. You reclaim all of that wasted energy. You redirect it back into yourself, into your purpose, into the vision that only you can see clearly. Your transformation is personal. It's sacred. It's not a performance for others to critique. It's not a spectacle for others to judge. It's a private revolution that happens in spaces no one else has access to. The tears you cried alone, the prayers you whispered in silence, the decisions you made when no one was watching. That's where real transformation lives. Not in the highlights, not in the announcements, not in the posts, but in the quiet moments where you chose yourself over comfort, growth over stagnation, truth over acceptance. Those are the moments that built you. And those are the moments no one else needs to understand. So stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Stop trying to make your light digestible for people who've chosen to live in darkness. Stop dimming your glow to make others comfortable with their dullness. Your transformation is complete when you no longer need anyone to witness it. When you no longer need anyone to validate it. When you no longer need anyone to understand it. Because the truth is, chosen one, you've already transformed. The evidence is in how you carry yourself, how you respond to chaos, how you maintain peace in spaces designed to steal it. Your energy already announced your evolution. Now it's time to trust that the right people already noticed, and the wrong ones never will.